Good. Okay. So my name's Jen. I'm from the Future Interaction Technology Lab at Swansea University in Wales in the UK. This piece of work is done with my colleagues Simon Robinson, Thomas Reitmaier and Matt Jones in Swansea, and it's in collaboration with a partner, Shashank Ahire from the IDC School of Design in IIT in Bombay. So, I want to begin by getting you to think a little bit for a minute. Imagine that you haven't got access to your mobile phone. Perhaps you left it at home, you've got no signal, the screen is broken, battery's dead. In this situation, would you borrow somebody else's phone? Maybe a partner, friend, co-worker, a stranger even, to make a call? Or what if the situation was reversed? Would you lend your phone to somebody else? So this is a thought experiment that we have come up with designed to highlight that when we hand over a phone to somebody else, we also hand over a trove of personal information. So photographs, messages, call logs, but also access to personal and possibly business-sensitive remote services. So this can be anything from Gmail to Snapchat. So when you're in a close relationship with somebody, this is somewhat acceptable. It shows trust, it can create intimacy, but outside of such partnerships, people often feel quite uneasy about sharing their phones. So the study here by Pearson et al., 2009, uncovered that 96% of users that lend their phone stayed physically present 96% of the time. So clearly, there's an emotional dimension to mobile phones, but there's also an economic dimension to sharing phones, right? So some devices are better quality than others. Some might have a much bigger screen and more kind of appropriate to watch videos on. Some might have a better camera. Some might have much more storage space than others. And also, certain devices might be in a better state of repair, right? So maybe I've got a cracked screen, or maybe I've gone over my data allowance for the month, or maybe my battery's dead because I've been using it too much. So in many cases, borrowing a phone is an advantage. Perhaps for me to take a picture with a higher resolution camera, or to make a call when I haven't got any signal. So this type of resource sharing is particularly common in emergent communities, emergent user communities, should I say. So emergent users are usually described as those who are just starting to get their hands on lower end or second-hand smartphones, okay? So often this can be just one per family, so quite often people share. But the crucial thing to note about these communities is that they're often from developing regions of the world, and they often have a significant amount of constraints when it comes to resources. And what I mean by that is things like they will have low internet connectivity, either because it's low signal or because they can't afford it, little airtime, or poor access to reliable power, so charging can be a problem, and so on, things like this, okay? So people tend to borrow phones a lot more often in these kind of contexts when they're out of battery or data and things like this. Also, other issues in these type of environment, not always, but admittedly, but quite often, you'll have a high crime rate, okay, which means that carrying a device around with you can make you a target for robbery. So this paper down here is by Walton et al., who studied the media sharing practices of young people in Kailisha, which is a township in Cape Town in South Africa. And they reported that many young people experience chronic insecurities because of high crime rates. And their mobile phones were often targeted for petty theft and more serious crimes as well. And we've been working in these kind of environments for many years, and we have noted this kind of continuous mantra that people tell us, you know, it's not safe to take your phone out, so on and so on. So yeah, we present Appropriate, which is designed with and for emergent users. And we introduce it as the concept as a sort of reframing of existing mobiles to better suit the context in which it was designed. So an appropriate module is a small, cheap, portable device that contains the user's mobile content and allows them to pick up another mobile device and use it as their own. Okay, but this is all without the need of a data connection. So now the security conscious can leave their phone in a safe place, maybe at home, whilst they can still access the information that's stored on the device on other phones. So while we see this as a really useful tool for security, the framework also brings about other benefits, allowing the sharing of devices both when resources are limited, maybe borrowing airtime from someone else, but using your own personal contacts, or when other devices are more appropriate. For instance, using a high quality camera, but saving the photos to your appropriate device. So here's how it works. Step 1, before you leave home, the user synchronizes their phone to the appropriate module. Their contacts, music, videos, and most recent photos and messages are synchronized to the appropriate device. They can then hide the small device in a pocket or within clothing and leave their phone at home. So now when they're out and about, any devices that have the accompanying appropriate app can be appropriated and used at any time. When the user wants to interact with their own content using a public or borrowed device, they simply open the app on the adopted mobile and enter a secret PIN number, which triggers automatic synchronization of their data onto the device. So the phone is now transformed to appear as if it was the user's own phone, displaying the apps and background wallpaper from the appropriate rather than those native to the borrowed device. So this is an example here. A user's watching a video from their media library on a public display in an auto rickshaw. Any new media that's created, so any photos taken, any videos recorded, contacts added, are saved directly to the appropriate device rather than to the phone. So here a user has borrowed a phone to take a photograph, the photo is saved to their appropriate device, and it does not remain on the borrowed phone after they log out. So when you finish interacting with the borrowed phone, you exit the app, which ensures all their media is removed from the appropriate device, and when the user returns to their own phone, opening the app synchronizes any updated media back to their personal device. So now a user can view content they made on a guest devices on their own personal phone. So you may be thinking right now, what about account switching, right? Isn't that the same thing? Well, ignoring the fact that this method will be downloading from the cloud, which uses data or Wi-Fi, which often aren't available, as these are resource-constrained environments, remember, actually switching users on a single device is not really a simple matter. So iOS doesn't really support account switching at all. If you want to switch users, you have to wipe the device or restore from a backup to change to another user. Android offers some support, but it's really far from seamless. So we experimented setting up and switching to a new account on a medium-end current device, Moto G4, I think it was. The process took just under 5 minutes and used 25 megabytes of mobile data. Also, separation of data between the owner and different accounts is not clean. So accounts are able to access data on SD cards, contacts are synced, but messages are not. Accounts are not by default allowed to make or receive SMS calls or make calls or have SMS messages. And also, depending on account security settings, logging into a second phone requires the account holder's original device to be physically present in order to authenticate via a security alert, which kind of defeats the point. So instead, we've got this. So this is the appropriate hardware with a 5-round kind for scale. It actually uses a local internal Wi-Fi to transfer data to and from phones. Looks and indeed is very cheap in comparison to a phone and requires no data connection to transfer. Okay, so this is the appropriate app on a borrowed phone. So simply you log in at the top here. When an appropriate module is in proximity, you just add in your PIN number and it automatically syncs. When capturing or browsing photographs, interaction is exactly as it would be on a user's phone. Contacts can be viewed and edited as normal, but calling a contact will use the airtime of a borrowed device and originate from that telephone number rather than the user's own number. And when sending SMS messages, users are given the option to either send immediately, which will use the borrowed device's airtime and the number of that device as well, or you can queue it for delivery so that it sends automatically when they return to their own phone. To disconnect from the borrowed device, you can just click finished, but also in a later version we've added, if it gets a little bit too far away, it just automatically cuts out and deletes everything from the borrowed phone. So Appropriate emerged through a multi-year design exercise involving Emergent users throughout to generate a range of concepts and prototypes, but I'm not going to talk about that here because there just really isn't enough time. Instead, I'll focus in on the studies of the final prototype. So we began with a series of exploratory lab studies with 3 distinct sets of Emergent users. Following from Cray et al., we created simulated environments that showed potential context of use via projected images, videos, and audio to give the impression of different locations whilst in the same physical space. Mobile devices were then placed in each context depending on the scenario, so between 1 and 3 in each scenario. So these range from high-quality tablets to small, compact, lightweight smartphones. This is an example. Okay, so in the bottom left here, this is a Matatu, which is a Kenyan shared minibus. You can see here the tablet is available on the back of the seat. And then you've got the public space here, which is the coffee shop. That's where you have 3 phones. Imagine in a scenario where several friends are in the same space. In total, we recruited 34 Emergent users from 3 countries, South Africa, Kenya, and India, to take part in these trials. So each were given an appropriate device and a phone. We asked them to imagine that this phone was theirs, and to think of the appropriate module as a sort of wrist-worn accessory. We attached it to their wrists here to reinforce that. We demonstrated the concept. We got, each phone had unique content on it specific to each participant. We asked them to look at it, type a PIN number, but then also to take a photograph of themselves using it and then switch phones, verifying that the photograph that they'd taken on the first device now appears on the second. They then visited the 4 simulated environments and did tasks, things like watch videos, take photographs, and so on. So in general, participants were most excited about the security aspect of the design, in particular that the device is a lot smaller than a phone and therefore not really much risk of being stolen. There's quite a few anecdotes here about how theft is a problem and how it's a good idea to avoid it. But there are also lots of comments around privacy, particularly for those that share phones with other members of their family. So after some prototype refinements, we then went back to 2 Emergent user communities, different ones than before, to conduct 5 weeks deployments of our improved design. This involves 32 participants from Cape Town and Mumbai. We recruited them in friendship groups to ensure that they had the possibility of sharing and had access to other devices with the appropriate app on it. And we gave each participant a module and installed the app on their own mobile Android device, which was a prerequisite of taking part of the study. So we asked participants to borrow somebody else's device using their appropriate module at least 3 times a week. We logged the usage data on both the appropriates and their phones and met them for interviews after 1, 3, and 5 weeks. So before we started, we surveyed people's attitudes and situations towards devices in the 2 locations. Because of the differences in the 2 cohorts, we decided to have different foci for each location. So in Cape Town, where 93% of the participants were really worried about device theft, they had a security focus. But in Mumbai, people were not so concerned over security, but their device sharing practices were much more common. So this had a device sharing focus. So in the Mumbai deployment, we recruited family or friendship groups that all shared phones, right? And in this case, each appropriate module was a standalone device and would behave as a guest on each phone. So for example, 3 people in the same family sharing one phone would each have their own appropriate device, and it would use it to log on to the shared phone to make it appear as if it was their own. So skipping ahead real quick to the results, average scores out of 10 in the initial follow-up session show particularly high ratings for usefulness of the appropriate system for phone sharing purposes. And as might be expected given the different context of the groups, participants in Cape Town felt the technology was more useful for security than the Mumbai group. Again, we had lots of positive comments about how useful the device was for security, particularly from our Cape Town cohort, as well as stories about how useful it was when they didn't have their phone with them. So one said the kids were using the phone and borrowed somebody else's, while another had accidentally left their phone at home so they could still use it to make a call. Some also commented on research sharing in terms of taking photographs, as well as connectivity, including stories about depleted airtime and data. Plenty of dead battery stories where the appropriate module helped them to access the information. One participant even said it saved his data when they accidentally wiped their phone, so that was useful. So 29 of the original 32 participants attended the final interview, and of these, 27 wanted to continue using this, so they found it very useful. So we allowed them to keep the appropriate hardware, and they continued using it. It also became apparent in the follow-up sessions that a lot of the participants had actually been downloading or transferring the app onto family and friends' devices so that they could use it with people, that you could use their module with the people that were not included in the study, which was very encouraging. So in conclusion, in many countries, having a mobile to hand makes people feel safer. In other places, for instance in more resource-constrained settings, having a phone on one's person can make someone feel more of a target for theft. In this work, we've developed and explored the concept of separating out the notions of data and device. An overarching goal of our approach has been to allow the financially valuable part of a component of a device, in this case the phone hardware, to be disconnected from the personally valuable component, which is the data that it holds. And we've illustrated how the appropriate approach is very useful in emergent user contexts where device security have been well documented as being quite a pressing issue. So in particular, we've identified its usefulness for security, whilst in dangerous situations, privacy, in device sharing situations, and for sharing resources, either when consumables such as data or battery are depleted, or to take advantage of better features such as a high-resolution camera or a bigger screen. Thank you very much.
We have some time for questions if anybody has any. You can come up to the mic. Just give us your name and where you came from.
Hi, I'm Chelsea and I'm from Cape Town, University of Cape Town, so I understand this fully and I've gone through this fear myself quite often. I guess my question would just be, in the ideal situation then everyone would have one of these devices, then who would be the person carrying the nice phone? I'm sure you've had this question.
Yeah, well, this is something we have thought about. I mean, we can envisage lots of different scenarios, right? If you were going around to your friend's house, then they'd be at home, so they'd have devices around the house. Or if you went to kind of, I don't know, campus and university, you'd find devices, shared devices in situations there. But I suppose, yeah, if you were going out as a group to meet other people, then yeah, you probably end up in some situation where everybody thought that they would have, somebody else would bring a phone when nobody has. But yeah, that is a little bit of an issue. But we would hope that everybody would have an appropriate module and you'd find a device somewhere, right? In the kind of overall goal of the whole thing, the devices would be dummies. They wouldn't have any kind of brain to them at all. And you could just, borrow somebody's that's kind of flying around if they have them, so, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Could you speculate on the lender's perspective a little bit on if I'm giving away my phone and I have all this private data, can people who I'm loaning my phone to still access that without me knowing, temporarily? And how would the app have to change if?
Yes, so the prototype that we built, yes. As the lenders, from the lender's point of view, at the moment, they, the person that you're lending it to could access your data. So the long-term kind of goal of this would be that every device would be empty. And all your data would be on the brain of the device, right? Of the module. So any device that you pick up would be blank. So if I was to lend it to you, I would take my brain out essentially, and then lend it to you, and then you put your brain into it. So the device itself is essentially, not useless, but it won't do much without the brain, right? So that would be the kind of ideal solution. But yes, at the moment, the lender would have to put up with the fact that the borrower could possibly access their data.
Do I still have time?
Oh, yeah, we still have time. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks. It was really lovely presentation. I'm Mikko from Aalto. And I was just, it's because mobile devices are originally designed for personal use only. And I'm just like really interested of your work in that sense, that how this could create new social interaction with mobile devices when you share things, and could you have possibility in the future work maybe consider approaching to analyze these interactions between people when they use these devices?
Well, yeah, we'd love to do the deployment we did was 5 weeks, and we analysed the use and so on of it, but we would ideally like to put it in place for a year or so and actually kind of, probably within a family where they do actually share devices between them, and just analyze what they do with it and so on. Because normally in the situation where you're sharing a phone with a family member, you haven't got any privacy, right? Everything's on there, so everybody can access everything. But in this case, if we give everybody their own appropriate device, then their data is somehow protected. So that is an interesting dynamic, and we would like to study that further, yes.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you all our speakers, and thank you.